Welcome to the Great Basin Fire Potential Briefing for Thursday, August 17th. This is Gina McGuire. Over the next couple of days, we will not have any significant impacts to fire potential across the Great Basin, just some isolated thunderstorms over central areas and an east to west line across Nevada and Utah near a stalled frontal boundary where we will see some isolated thunderstorms with a mix of wet and dry rainfall. However, as we go into the weekend and early next week, thunderstorms will increase and eventually expand north back into Idaho. In the meantime, drier conditions will continue across Idaho into northern Nevada and northern Utah. Over the last 24 hours, we did see isolated thunderstorms, again over anywhere from northeast Utah back towards central Nevada, with a few isolated strikes along the Sierra front. Most rainfall amounts were less than 1/10 of an inch reported. However, as you can see from the precip image on the left, there were probably some heavier amounts in parts of the Uinta Basin. Great Basin fire activity yesterday was light across the area. Over the last 1 to 4 weeks, we've generally seen precipitation across the eastern half of the Great Basin over the last week, with very dry conditions over central and western Nevada. Over the last month, we've seen precipitation tied to monsoon moisture, generally over the southern half of the Great Basin, which has been above normal for the time of year. However, further north, we've seen below normal precipitation across northern Nevada and Utah up into Idaho. How our fuel conditions are represented by this recent drying pattern over parts of the north. Still very critical ERCs over the central Idaho mountains, despite the cool front moving through earlier this week, bringing cooler temperatures and higher humidity. ERCs are still above the 80th to 90th percentile. They have decreased, however, and are now below record levels, but have already increased back to above normal with just the dry conditions and warming temperatures over the last 1 to 2 days. 1,000-hour fuel moistures have also increased a little bit, but are still below normal. 10-hour fuel moisture has been decreasing as the drier conditions have set in across much of the Great Basin and are below the 3rd to 4th percentile over much of the western 2/3 of the area. The satellite loop for this morning shows generally clear skies across the Great Basin. You can see from this weak trough of low pressure where that front has stalled, anywhere from northeast Utah back into central Nevada, and there are some clouds this morning over eastern Utah. Today we'll likely see the least amount of lightning activity over the next week, with only a few isolated storms near that boundary from central Nevada into Utah. However, we will see a slight increase tomorrow and a further increase this weekend. Now looking at that weather pattern for today, again you can see the drier air that's moved in across Idaho and the western half of Nevada, and this dry air is what will help thunderstorm activity decrease today along that frontal boundary over central Nevada and central Utah. Therefore, no high risk is issued. We still do have low to moderate fire potential, especially on the western and northern side of the Great Basin that has been on the dry side. Relative humidity today will range from the single digits in western Nevada to the low to mid-teens, with the exception of the higher elevations. The image on the right shows where we're expecting those thunderstorms. Again, definitely more isolated than what we have seen the last couple of days. On Friday, we will continue to see that dry air in place in the north. However, right along that boundary, we may see a slight increase, so no high risk is issued. Again, thunderstorms will be occurring in areas that fuels have moderated. Relative humidity will remain about the same on Friday, with possibly a slight decrease in the north, and you can see a slight increase of that thunderstorm activity right along the frontal boundary, really across Utah, back into eastern and central Nevada, and then parts of the central Sierra. By Saturday, we start to see a weak area of low pressure develop off the southern California coast, which may push a little bit more moisture further north into the basin, with still low to moderate fire potential expected. Relative humidity may increase slightly, but really remain about the same on Saturday. However, we may see that lightning expand a little bit further north, mainly along the Sierra front, with isolated lightning strikes in far western Nevada into possibly northwest Nevada, and then still continuing further east with an increase in lightning activity across Utah. The overall forecast amount of precipitation represents what we just talked about, with most of the precipitation near the frontal boundary in central Utah into eastern Nevada and also in the central Sierra, but also light amounts in parts of western Nevada and back into the central mountains. As we move through the weekend, on Sunday we will see that moisture increase and spread further north, as you can see from the image on the left, so we will see lightning move into parts of southern and southeast Idaho. We have not issued any high risk for the weekend. We will be monitoring these thunderstorms as they move up into Idaho and further into northwest Nevada, as some of these areas still have some critical fuels. Right now it looks like thunderstorms will be a mix of wet and dry. On Monday, deeper moisture pushes north across Utah and into southern Idaho. Therefore, for the eclipse, we likely will have at least some cloud cover across Idaho and Wyoming and areas further south in the basin. However, right now it looks like lightning activity will generally be across far southern Idaho and southeast Idaho and then across Utah and Nevada. On Tuesday, that moisture pushes north finally into the central Idaho mountains. We have not issued any high risk. However, those areas are very critical still and will continue to dry out over the next 5 days. Therefore, we will continue to monitor that lightning activity, and if it is on the dry side, we may issue some high risk for the central mountains. Further south, we will see continued thunderstorm activity across the basin. On Wednesday, very similar conditions. However, we do have some drier air starting to work its way into southern and western areas of Nevada. Therefore, we will likely see a decrease in lightning activity, with the bulk of the lightning pushed a little bit further north and east, generally across Idaho, Wyoming, Utah, and then the northern and eastern half of Nevada. Generally low to moderate fire potential, and you can see how many of our PSAs across the eastern half of the area have turned back to green as that moisture remains in place for a couple of days. The overall forecast amount of precipitation for the next 7 days looks very similar to what we saw in the 3-day, but you can see the precipitation that has moved further north into Idaho, and that's mainly for the Sunday through Wednesday time period, with the heavier amounts generally confined to Utah. Over the 8 to 14-day period, which takes us into the very end of August, still warm temperatures continue across the Great Basin with either near normal or below normal precipitation. That concludes our briefing for today. If you have any questions, feel free to contact us. Thank you for listening.